Welcome to Promote, Profit, Publish. I'm your host, Juliette Clark, and we have a really important topic today. I hope you'll pay close attention. And kind of piggybacking on this, our February event, February 6th, 9 a.m. Mountain Time, is going to be on copyrights and contracts in 2026. So before I get started with today's topic, I want to talk a little bit about why that is so important. AI is changing the landscape. And what that means is there are companies popping up all over the place that are challenging copyrights. So you need to get your book copyrighted so it doesn't get pirated. There's a lot of that going on right now. And unless you have that certificate, you have no standing in court. Also, things going on, images. These companies that are popping up are going after image copyrights, which means you better own the commercial version. And then there are new items that the Copyright Office will not copyright for you. So show up for that. You can go over to bamagtraining.com and sign up for that event. It is well worth coming to, especially if you have questions about copyrights, what you can do, what you can't. And you're going to start seeing some new stuff in the contracts that cover all of this because the platforms that we work with to upload your books, they're asking us questions. And so we need to be able to answer those questions and make sure that we have our answers correct. So tune in for that. Very, very important. So the topic I want to talk about today is publishing preparedness, because we are seeing with AI coming into vogue that people are getting really sloppy with what they submit for publishing. So there are ways that we can tell that you have used AI in your book writing. And I don't say that to say don't use it to write your book, because it can be a great research tool. You can use it for a lot of things. But your book should not be wholly created from AI. And that is actually one of the questions they ask us on the upload now is, was this book written with AI? And there is a distinction here between your book being written by AI and research and some of it being written by AI. So I know myself, I will engage AI for some rewrites if I don't like the way something came out the first time. That's the distinction is it a whole book versus is it, some areas rewritten? But even more important with that is that you engage a professional editor. Because that's what we're seeing so much of is people are using AI and they're assuming that the AI is correct. And many times it's not. It makes errors. The biggest ones I see are the ones where there and there. It'll have the wrong version of there. I know that probably didn't make sense, but there's no there. And so you still need to engage a professional editor. And we actually have you certify that now because we've gotten several books this year where an editor has not been engaged. And what that creates is a situation where the formatters start charging more money. And of course, the publishers are going to pass that cost on to you. My company personally, we have 3 versions that you get on formatting. The assumption and the rule is that there are minor changes from version to version, maybe a comma missing, a little bit of grammar. But if you've engaged a professional editor already, we shouldn't even have those. So that professional editor is really important. Another thing, when I hire an editor that I look for on my personal books now is an editor that will stay with me through the formatting process. So what does that mean? It means that your book was professionally edited by this person, but as we submit it for formatting, they go through the formatted copies as well and make minor corrections if needed. Now, why is this important? Psychologically, when we've written a book, we see things when we look that aren't necessarily there. And what I mean by that is if a word is supposed to be there, we will just go right on as if the word is there because in our minds it is, but it may not be on that paper. And that's one of the places where, that professional editing is necessary. Not to mention that most of us are not professional writers. I mean, I know personally, I'm not a great writer. I'm a better storyteller than I am a writer. which means that I need that professional edit and I need a deep edit. And the editors hate me because I write like I speak. I would call that authentic. They don't see it that way. So when you get ready to hire that publishing company or you publish yourself, make sure that you have that fully edited manuscript to go with. Now, I'm going to say I have seen some incredibly sloppy self-published books this year. And so if you're being self-published or either by a company or you're attempting it yourself, know what the heck you're doing because I've seen awful self-published books this year. So that's the first thing. Second thing you should have ready, have your cover design ready before you engage that publisher. Why do I say that? Because dealing with a cover is almost like a game of telephone. Like, you tell me what you want, I translate that, and I tell the designer what I want or what you want. And that can be incredibly misleading and lead to a lot of revisions. So if you have the opportunity to engage your own graphic designer and say, give me a front cover mock-up, that's what you want, a front cover mock-up in the size that you think you'll use. If you don't have the size, it can always be modified. But if it's possible, do it in the 6x9 or 6x6 or, whatever it is that you envisioned for your book. Now, I'm going to tell you a cautionary tale of why I said this. Several years ago, the lovely Miss Gretchen Heido came to me with her book, Break Free from Your Dirty Little Secrets. And she said, I want something a little racy. Well, that title and racy translated to me as kind of racy. But by the time it got to the designer, we literally got like a soft core porn erotica book cover back. So she chose a different track. So that's what I mean by that game of telephone, because your version of racy and my version of racy and that male cover designer's vision of racy, we may not all agree on what's racy. So it is important to have a mock-up, an idea of what you want on there. Next item, have a current bio and headshot. I always encourage my authors to have a 100, 150, and 200 word bio because you can use them in different places. On the back cover of the book, we don't have a lot of room, so it's usually a very short bio that's back there. If you choose to put a longer bio in the back page of the book, that would be great too, and maybe some contact information. But you should have those three, especially if you're going to promote the book, because any podcast you're on, any media you engage, they're going to want to see that. Headshot. Please have something not only current, but professionally done. I have had 2 or 3 books this year where somebody tried to get away with the camera and a selfie. They never look good. The lighting's not good. You're not wearing professional makeup. Have something done that's professional, touched up if you'd like it touched up, but have it ready to go before you engage the publisher. Because when I get a book, I have a tech business where people come to me with their tech business white papers, and they actually give the books out at events. They're ready to go. They need those books. They have an event in mind. We had someone in September that had a book event in Spain. And so we had to have books out to Spain by December during the busiest season of the year. So of course they had to have their headshots in order. They had to have their bios in order. Everything had to go very, very smoothly for us to get that book out in a timely manner. So be sure that headshot is current. There's nothing worse than using a headshot that's 10 years old or 20 years old in some cases. And then people meet you in person and they're like, oh, is that you? You've aged. And I actually had that happen in real estate. I ran across a very big agent, and when she showed the house, I was shocked that she was like 75 years old, and this picture looked like she was in her 50s. And it was a little bit shocking. So updated and professional. So spend that money and get it done. You probably are going to need it for your website, whatever business you have, you're going to need a current one. Myself, I am guilty of that right now. My last one was taken in 2020, and I'm about to turn 65. So I need a new headshot that reflects a few wrinkles I have gained throughout the last 5 years. I already mentioned your front cover. Endorsements. If you can have endorsements on the back of your book, one or two of them if there's room, and a number of them in the front of the book, when people open the book and see all of these great people have endorsed you, your book looks more professional. Unfortunately, most people wait, unless they've been working with a really good book developer, they wait until they get to me. These are so much harder than you think they are. Think about this for a minute. You're going to someone who's very, very busy, maybe prominent, so even busier, and you're going to get a yes or no from them. But the problem isn't the yes or no usually, it's the getting them to sit down and write it. And so I would plan a good 3 months, have an outline, have a sample chapter, have something that you can give them. The procedure that we quite often use is if you don't come to us with the endorsements, we have you send them out right away and ask if they can have them within 30 days. If they don't step up within 30 days, then we create a series of 10 to 20 endorsements and say, is there one here that sounds like you that we can modify and use for you? So that gets the endorser going pretty quickly. And speaking of endorsements and forwards, remember what I said about that professional editor? Those should be edited as well, and the back cover blurb. Now, why am I saying that? We just published a book, and just last week, and I'm recording this in November, the author came back to me and said, you made a mistake on my foreword. And I said, please show me the mistakes we made. Well, it turns out we didn't make those mistakes. The person who wrote the foreword had grammar that was less than stellar. The author who read it didn't catch the errors, and she gave them to us. And part of the publishing process when you're in hybrid or self-publishing with us is we don't check your work. We check our work, but we don't check your work. And that brings me to another part on the professional editing. The book you give us is the book you will get back. So if you haven't had a professional editor, and we just ran into this last night, the headers were not standardized. Some of them were capitalized, some of them weren't capitalized. It all needs to be standard, and a good editor will catch all of that. So all of that, super, super important. And then attention to details. When your publisher gives you back that first draft of the formatting, pay attention, go line by line item, and turn around quickly. We have literally had 3 books in a row where the author didn't pay attention to the detail, and we sent the book to market, and all of a sudden we had to revamp it. Now that revamping costs money because we have to send it back to the formatter who's now going to charge us. We have to send it back to the ebook formatter who's going to charge it. In the case of one of them, he forgot an entire chapter. So we had to go back to the cover formatter because now the spine didn't fit. So there are ramifications for all of this. And most self-publishing is pretty expensive, especially if you're going hybrid. So the publisher more than likely is going to charge you for that. We actually have it in our contract. Once we send your book to market, if there are changes, you're going to pay for them. And that brings me back to that formatting with the professional. If you only get three rounds of revisions, so the formatter will allow a few grammar, spelling, maybe there are spaces where there shouldn't have been, but you're not going to get to rewrite that book. They will charge me, which I'm going to turn around and charge you for a whole new manuscript. So you have to be careful. If you're trying to keep costs down, this is the best way to do it, is engage those professionals. So just some things, like I said, the manuscript, when you hand it off, have it laid out the way you like it. If there is a font you like, go grab that font and tell the publisher up front. Ask them, can you use this font? Is this one you can use? The publisher is usually happy to give you an opinion on the font as well. I know we recently got a book that had a very scrolly font, and we were like, no, 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 no. People can't read this. And I know my own kids, they stopped teaching cursive. I think one of my kids knows cursive and the other doesn't. So you have to be careful what fonts you use with them, because we've got a whole, I think, 2 generations of kids now that haven't used cursive. It's sort of our parents' secret weapon against hiding stuff. Also, with the images, make sure your graphs and illustrations, charts, whatever you have to offer, make sure they are 300 DPI or better. Just this week, I'm republishing a book for someone who said my publisher did a really poor job on this. Well, when I looked at it, she suggested that perhaps she needed heavier paper. That wasn't the problem at all. The graphs, charts, and illustrations that she did were not 300 DPI or better. So I have now sent her to a graphic designer to have them done the right way so we get the right resolution. Images. Make sure if you're pulling images from a deposit photo, a photo bucket, wherever you're pulling them from, that you have a commercial license. This is not like when you're pulling images for your landing pages and some things on the internet that like I know I have a subscription at Deposit Photo. I rarely use that now just because there are so many companies out there that are challenging the copyrights. And if you're making money, so what I mean by that is your book is going to be a revenue stream, and you're using an image that has not been commercially paid for, someone could come back and be a copyright violation on that. So be sure that you own the copyright or you have purchased the correct image on the platform you got it. I'll be really honest, I rarely use Deposit Photo anymore because of the copyright violations. I've seen firsthand in working with Podetize that even my podcast images have been challenged several times. Now they own the licenses, so they've gotten involved. They've given the licenses to the people because they do it right, that are these copyright violations companies. So make sure that you don't end up violating a copyright in that way. And also the images need to be 300 DPI as well. I mentioned getting a professional headshot. Usually that person who's a photographer, those will be 300 DPI. The ones you take with your phone, not so much. And for the most part, I use AI to make my images now. And I request 300 DPI and I ask for them to be done a certain way so that we don't violate copyright. And by the way, that's one of the things the Copyright Office is no longer copywriting is AI illustrations, AI images. None of that is being copyrighted now. They will not do it. So for a lot of the marketing, books, everything, I use FAL.ai for my stuff. So make sure that, that's the things. Make sure you have the right licenses. Make sure everything is in order before you send that book off to the publisher. Now, with us, people work with us because they work on platform building. So we will accept your project without that done, but we will not go to publishing without that done. So that is very important. We want to, and we want to be able to converse with that editor. We want to be able to see what the problems are and minimize those extra costs for everyone we publish. I think that's it. Just be aware that the more organized you are in this process, the better your book is going to come out. And there are so many people right now that just aren't prepared for the publishing world. And as a publisher, I'm here to guide you, but I need you to follow the rules so that we don't get in trouble with what we're doing. Because quite often when we upload, that's where we find out for the first time that your images aren't high-res images, because it'll actually come back and give us an error message to that effect. And we can go through with the publishing, but that impacts the quality of the book. We just ran into that with a book we published that her images were background images and they weren't 300 DPI. And she was very disappointed when she got the first version. And she said, this looks a little blurry. And, we compromised on it. I said, this is the background. The inspirational quote is the important part of here. So I don't think people are going to notice it. But yeah, that wasn't a 300 DPI. Where did you get that? Another incident we have, somebody was pulling images just straight off the internet. And I said, you were violating someone's copyright there. And they gave me a lot of pushback. They said, oh, if it's in the public domain, we can take it. That's not necessarily true. So, make sure you have all your ducks in a row. So thank you for stopping by. As usual, if you have questions about this, reach out to me, Juliet@superbrandpublishing.com. I can probably answer questions for you, but just know that your publishing contract, your publishing experience will be much smoother if you have all of your ducks in a row before you get started. All right, see you next episode.